Hey friends, it's Kaylin, and today we're going to be talking about my summer wrap-up. So we're going to be talking about some books I've read this summer, that is June through September, and I'm going to not touch on every single book, although I'll list them all below, but I'll break down sort of the types of books I've been reading and then tell you about maybe some of the very best and maybe even one or two I didn't love as much. This is my channel, Kaylin May, where we talk about books and sometimes food and a little bit of life thrown in. If you're new here, please join the family, subscribe. If you enjoy my videos, liking them is very helpful. And I also always love interacting with folks in the comments. So if you have read any of the books I'm about to talk about, or maybe you had differing opinions on them and you'd like to share that with me, I love talking to you all. So feel free to drop a comment and we can get a conversation rolling. So I'm not going to list every single one of the 31 books I've read this summer. If you want to check out every single one with ratings and some details, you can check out my Goodreads, and that link is below in the description box. I have every book I've read, when I read it, what I thought about it, the star rating in chronological order, and you're more than welcome to do that. Also, if you want to hear about some of the books that I'm not going to talk about now, but I have talked about in other videos, I'm going to link that below. So for example, The City We Became is the first book I read in June, and I have an entire review in one of these two corners that you can go find. I also did a reading update video a couple of months back where I talked about The City We Became, The King's Justice, The Shadow of the Wind, Everything I Never Told You, The Argonauts, and Me and White Supremacy, and all of those books I've already discussed, so I won't be discussing any of them today. I also did the Reading Rush in July, and there was a Reading Rush video that I will link to as well somewhere here. So if you're interested in hearing about my year of rest and relaxation, The Angel's Game, Ready Player One, or Children of the Land, go ahead and watch that video. Everything else I may have talked about in one of my book haul videos, my library haul or any of those videos, but I haven't discussed in depth, except for I believe I did talk about Normal People by Sally Rooney in the book haul video that I made. That again, links are in the description, up in the cards, they're somewhere. So if any of those books are interesting to you and you want to hear my thoughts on them, videos are already made, and I just don't want to make multiple so that we can condense. So some very quick reading stats. So I read between June to September, and it is the last day of September today, so we're gonna count what I've read so far as what I've read in September. 31 books, which is phenomenal. Way more than I've read most summers, I will say. And of those 31 books, 9 of them were written by men, 21 of them were written by women, and 1 was written by a non-binary author. And I really want to read more trans and non-binary authors, so that is a place that I really want to see some improvement in my fall and winter seasons. That's a place I really love to lean into. And I think when I did like a reading breakdown a couple of months ago, I said the same thing, and I think I had 0 trans and non-binary authors, so at least we've moved up to 1, but I could definitely use more there. I definitely did a little bit better in terms of like general queer reading, but barely. Again, I could use a little bit more diversity there. So I would love to add some of that into my fall and winter months. Okay, in terms of demographics for race, this is based on how people have publicly identified. The books that I read between June and September, about a third of them have been by people of color, and about 2/3 of them have been by white folks. And so again, I'm looking to sort of shift that a little bit into fall and winter. So to break down sort of the books that I read by stars, I read 12 5-star books, which is amazing, 14 4-star books, and 5 3-star books. And one of those 3-star books was being a little generous just for nostalgia's sake, but we'll get there. So I had a pretty excellent reading summer. So I'm going to update I'm going to tell you about mostly the 5-star reads, maybe a couple of 4-star reads, and I'm just gonna go through them in chronological order. Again, I'm not talking about all 31 books. Many of them have already been talked about, but I do just wanna highlight a few. So the first book that I wanna highlight was a book I read, I believe in July. This is The Glass Hotel by Emily St. John Mandel. And I read Station 11 a few years back and I absolutely loved it. I love the way Emily St. John Mandel writes, and I just loved the whole story. It blew me away. So I was really excited to read The Glass Hotel, and I heard some, not mixed reviews, but I heard people saying like, wow, it's really dark and they didn't love all the characters. It was one of my most anticipated new reads, probably of this year, or the first half of this year. And you know, it was dark, but I loved the descriptions of, it's just like in this glass hotel, haha, in a very remote part of Canada, and it's just beautifully, just like lushly described, and the characters are not the characters didn't always make the decisions you wanted them to make, but they were interesting to follow. So it follows a Ponzi scheme, and I'm somebody who really enjoys like con artists and Ponzi scheme books. It's an interesting thing. And so I found that interesting. I also found the main woman, I think her name is Vincent, very interesting as she just tries to navigate, I don't know, she makes a bunch of choices and she tries to live with each of them and interact with the world in a variety of ways, and thinking about like how having money can both, like the process of getting money and losing money, in terms of like losing things in a Ponzi scheme or going from being a waitress to a trophy wife, how that like can change your life, and what choices you might make around that and what people do to survive. And I just thought it was really well written. I do think it's darker than her other books. I did like Station 11 more, I think. Station 11 was a 5-star read for me, and The Glass House was a 4-star read, but I really enjoyed it. I just love how she writes. I will read anything she writes. So that's the first book I wanted to highlight for you. The next book I read when I got to Connecticut at the end of July, and this book I read after the reading rush, and it was Trick Mirror by Gia Tolentino. And this was my first 5-star, this is the first 5-star read I'm going to tell you about. And I took notes in this beautiful journal because it was a library book and because it was just so good. She talks about everything from reality TV to the internet to self-optimization. It's very much in line with the millennial experience and talks just a huge amount about things that I very much related to. I thought that her writing was both witty and engaging and academic, but incredibly accessible and easy to understand. She just really like walks this line between engaging with things like the internet or reality TV in a very academic, inquisitive, logical, linear way, but then also writing with such candor and honesty and without frills. So it's both incredibly thought-provoking and like you're talking to a good friend, and that quality in essay writing, personal essay writing, I find to be very rare. People either tend to be very personal and intimate and it's mostly like talking to a friend, which I love, or it's incredibly academic and can sometimes be a little bit pedantic or a little bit more just in the head rather than in the heart. And Gia Tolentino manages to be both. The other thing I love is that she's talking about like millennial issues, but as a millennial. So she's not like a baby boomer looking down on those millennials and their avocado toast who can't afford a home. Instead, she's somebody who's like, all right, I'm here, I've been here, let's talk about this. And so it's very much like, let's do investigative reporting and research this and think this through. And also, let's think about like what this means to me and broaden that and think, well, what's the context, what's the cultural moment, and what might this mean to other people? And I loved it. Like, I think everyone needs to read this book. It was so good. It was so good. I got it from the library. I then immediately bought it on Audible because she narrates it. I can't wait to listen to it. So doing a lot of hand gestures because I love it so much. So immediately after Trick Mirror, I read Midnight Sun by Stephanie Meyer. And wow, my teenage heart was so happy about it. Guys, it was so long. It was 900 pages or 700 pages or just hundreds of pages longer than it needed to be. It was longer than Twilight by like 300 or 400 pages. It was the exact same storyline, I mean, clearly, but like down to conversations, down to like actual dialogue. Like I feel like 50% of that book was copy pasted from Twilight. Being a little, again, dramatic about it. But what I did love about it is that you got some extra Cullen content. I learned that that sometimes that they call Edward Ed sometimes, which is a nice little nugget for the universe to know. And you got to see Bella in a different light. I actually liked Bella better in Midnight Sun than I liked her in Twilight, and I disliked Edward more. So maybe they both just looked better through the other's eyes. I don't know. He is just so angsty, and they say he thinks about how fragile she is so much. Every single page, it's about how fragile she is. He uses the word fragile. So Stephanie Meyer uses the word fragile probably, I would say upwards of like, it felt like 50 times, upwards of 50 times in that book. If he's not saying the word fragile, he's saying the word breakable, or he's talking about how like she's like silk covering glass, like her skin is like silk covering glass of her bone structure, or she's just so clumsy, or she's gonna die and she's so mortal, and that is what 80% of that book is. And I could have done with a little less of it. It just felt so repetitive. It was like at a certain point, we get it, we understand the concept, you are immortal, she is breakable. But I also thought that Edward read as a lot creepier in Midnight Sun. I think that like he was always creepy in Twilight and controlling and manipulative and stalkery, but in Midnight Sun, because you can also hear his thought process, it's like, it's not great. It's not great, but it was a nostalgic read, it was a fast read, it was a fun read. My little like 14-year-old heart gave this a 3 out of 5, even though it probably deserved a 2 out of 5. Okay, the next book I want to highlight is The Death of Vivekoji by Akwaeke Emezi. And this was my next 5-star read that I wanted to tell you about. This book was absolutely incredible. I think I talked a little bit about it actually in the last video I made. I did a social dilemma tag based off of the documentary currently on Netflix to get creative and recommend some books based on themes in the social dilemma. And I did talk a little bit about the death of Vivekoji there, so you can find it anywhere. But you can find the link somewhere, description or cards. But I loved this book so much. The writing style was creative and engaging. The storyline was engrossing. It was just the right length. Like you got enough to the thing I loved about this book was the main character was revealed as you went along. So you learn more about Vivek as the book goes along, which is true of a lot of books, is like the more you read, the more you know. But this was sort of like an unveiling. Like you didn't completely understand what was going on. You didn't completely understand, you know, motivations. You didn't really know what happened. Clearly, with the title, like The Death of Vivekoji, he dies. And you don't really understand the circumstances surrounding his death. And then slowly, like piece by piece by piece, like layers are pulled off and you get to see the core of it. By the end, you see like what happened and why it happened and what the context was and what was meaningful about it. And it is just heartbreaking and beautiful. And it does a really good job of talking about family dynamics, using sort of grief as a lens to explore like parental dynamics within, you know, the parental unit, and like parent-kid dynamics and friend dynamics. Like I just thought it did a really beautiful job of like, and then also like uncle, aunt, like extended family dynamics. It was gorgeous. It was such a triumph of writing, and I cannot speak highly enough of it. Again, read this book. The next book I wanted to talk about was Miss Iceland, and I'm going to butcher the author's name because it is Icelandic and I don't know how to say it, but I think it is Audur Eva Olafsdottir. And this book I got from NetGalley, so thank you NetGalley for letting me read this book. It was really lovely. It was a 5-star read. It follows this main character who's a woman named Hekla after a volcano. She's a poet, and it really, to me, it felt very much like a meditation on the cost of both like living within societal expectations and living outside of them. So it follows Hekla, who's the main character, who's a poet, which is in Iceland during the time it takes place, like a very non-traditional route for women to go. Most poets are men, and they're very well known, and they have like this culture, this ethos around them. And in fact, Hekla actually dates a poet at one point in time who like goes to the poet's coffee shop and gets things published, but Hekla is actually way more talented and successful, but is not able to have, initially at least, any sort of public ability or public shine. And then her best friend is gay, and he has a very hard time he can't be like openly gay in Iceland at the time. And so she's getting pressure to marry and not be a poet. He's getting pressure to not be who he is. And then it also talks a little bit about her childhood best friend who has this urge to write as well, but instead of sort of pursuing her dreams, she got married and has kids and is very stuck. And so it just really did a great job of showing people who made choices that either put them outside of societal expectations, being a poet, staying within societal expectations, getting married and having kids and settling down, or, you know, are not making choices necessarily, but just are, you know, inherently something like that society doesn't accept at the moment. So I thought that that was just gorgeous. And the reason it's called, it takes place in the 1960s. And the reason that it's called Miss Iceland is because Hekla is very beautiful. And so everyone tells her that she should go up for the Miss Iceland pageant. And what she wants to do is write poetry, not be a beauty queen. And so it just, I don't know, it's beautiful. It's so, so beautiful. You should read it. Everyone should read it. I just loved it. I loved all these books. Oh my goodness. The book I read directly after Miss Iceland was Emergent Strategy by Adrienne Maree Brown. And this was very much a like toolkit almost. It broke down what emergent strategy is and how to use it as an activist or as a leader in movement building, in social justice causes, and was just so thoughtful and so wonderful, and not only gave really good tools, but just expanded my perspective on how to think about movement building, ground up, but also like how to live my life, how to move through the world, how to make decisions, how to listen to myself, how to learn from nature, how to build in community. My highlighter ran out of ink by the end of it. I was like, every page had multiple highlights. Adrienne Maree Brown is incredible, and I can't wait to read Pleasure Activism, which is another book she published recently, so on my TBR for sure. The last book I'd like to talk about, I read a bunch in between these two, probably like 10, but the next book I'd like to talk about, or the last book I'd like to talk about, is The Whole by Hiroko Oyamada. And this was a very short book. I also got this from NetGalley. Thank you, NetGalley. I probably read it within an hour and a half, and it was so strange. So it's a translated work of Japanese literature, and it takes place in rural Japan. It follows this woman who has moved into a house and with her husband, and he's working all day, working really late, crazy hours, and she is alone at home. She had to quit her job to move out there, and she doesn't really have a purpose in life. She doesn't really know what she wants to do, and so she doesn't do much of anything. And it's in the summer, and one day she's taking a walk by the riverside, and there's like this hole that she falls into, but it's exactly her size and shape, and she can't get out of, and then very bizarre things start happening. It reminded me of a little bit of My Neighbor Totoro. So weird, so wonderful, short and sweet, and a little bit unresolved at the end. It has like kind of a magical system, but it doesn't, or it has like magical realism elements. It reminds me of like a Murakami, but much shorter and a little bit easier to track. and a couple of other Japanese authors I've read. Strange Weather in Tokyo comes to mind. I really like that genre of Japanese fiction, so I really enjoyed it. I don't think it's for everybody, but I did really love it. So I actually ended up giving this a 3.5 out of 5. It was fanciful and dark at the same time, if those two words can go together, and just unsettling and strange, and I enjoyed the ways that it felt claustrophobic, but also currently in a pandemic. I don't know, it felt sometimes, in some ways it hit very close to home. So anyway, those are the books I'd like to talk to you about. Those are some of the highlights of the books I've read recently. If you want to see more of the books that I've been reading, you can always follow me on Goodreads. And if you enjoy this video and want to hang around a little bit more, feel free to subscribe, hit that notification bell to know when I am gonna post again, and I will catch you all in the next one. All right, take care guys. I hope you guys are safe and well. All right, cheers.